canine German Shepherd refused to leave the girl's coffin. Then the soldiers discovered the shocking truth. They thought it was just grief. A loyal canine German Shepherd standing guard by a small white coffin during the rain-soaked funeral of a young girl. But as the soldiers tried to move him, something unimaginable happened. What they uncovered left everyone speechless and changed the lives of those present forever. This is a story of loyalty that goes beyond life itself, and a hidden truth no one could have seen coming. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what happens next, because this story will stay with you long after it ends. The rain fell relentlessly that afternoon at Arlington National Cemetery. Rows of soldiers stood at attention, their uniforms soaked, their faces as cold and pale as the marble headstones surrounding them. The soft notes of a bugle played in the distance, mingling with the quiet sobs of the girl's grieving parents. By the small white coffin, adorned with delicate lilies and a single stuffed bear, sat Rex, a canine German Shepherd known for his unmatched discipline and courage in the field. But today, he wasn't the fearless military dog everyone knew. Today, he was just a broken-hearted guardian, refusing to leave the side of the little girl he had loved more than life itself. Rex's handler, Sergeant Michael Grant, stood nearby, his fists clenched and jaw tight. "Come on, buddy," he whispered through the rain, kneeling beside the dog, but Rex wouldn't move. He pressed his body against the coffin, his wet fur matted to the polished wood, his eyes locked forward, as if watching over something sacred. The funeral had ended over an hour ago. The guests had slowly drifted away, umbrellas closing as cars pulled off into the distance. Yet Rex remained, motionless, determined. The soldiers exchanged concerned glances. "We need to take him, Mike," Captain Reynolds said quietly. "We can't leave him out here all night." Michael nodded and stepped forward again. He tugged gently at Rex's collar, but the dog let out a low, mournful whine and pushed even closer to the coffin. His body trembled, not from the mud, but from something deeper, something unspoken. And that's when it happened. Rex suddenly raised his head, his ears perked as if hearing a sound no one else could. Then, without warning, he placed both paws on the coffin and began to scratch at it desperately, his powerful claws scraping against the wood. "Rex, stop!" Michael shouted, rushing to pull him back. But the dog growled, not aggressively but protectively. His eyes went with desperation. The soldiers froze. Something wasn't right. "Open it," Rex's handler said, his voice cracking with emotion. The funeral director hesitated, glancing nervously at the girl's grieving mother standing nearby. But she nodded through her tears. "Please, if there's something—" With trembling hands, the coffin was slowly opened. What they saw next made every heart in that cemetery stop. Lying in the coffin wasn't just the body of young Emily Rose. Clutched tightly in her small hands was a small beeping device, one that none of them had noticed before. A bomb. Buried within the stuffed bear that sat atop her chest was a hidden explosive, connected to a silent timer. It was set to detonate within minutes. The soldiers moved in an instant. Bomb disposal units were called, the area evacuated. The skilled technicians worked quickly, and with only seconds left, they successfully disarmed the device. Silence fell over the cemetery once again, but this time, it wasn't the peaceful quiet of a funeral. It was the breathless stillness that comes after life has narrowly escaped death. Captain Reynolds looked at Rex, who now sat calmly beside the coffin once more, his eyes soft but alert. "He saved us all," the captain whispered. And then the truth emerged. Investigations revealed the bombing was a planned act of terror, one designed to take out a large number of military personnel and civilians during the highly publicized funeral. But no one had counted on Rex, on his loyalty, his instincts, and his unbreakable bond with the little girl he had protected in life. And now, even after her death. That day, Rex wasn't just a military canine. He was a hero who saved countless lives because he refused to leave the side of the one he loved most. And from that moment on, everyone who walked past Emily Rose's grave would see the bronze statue placed beside it, an exact replica of Rex, forever guarding her resting place, a reminder of a bond that even death could not break. The next day, news of Rex's heroic actions had already spread far beyond the cemetery gates. Major news networks covered the story, showing heart-wrenching footage of the rain-soaked funeral, and Rex standing unmoved by the small coffin. Across the country, people watched in disbelief as the details of the foiled attack came to light, and in every household, one question echoed: how did this dog know? Back at the military base, Rex sat quietly in the corner of the K-9 unit's quarters. His eyes were distant, his body still tense, despite the warmth and safety of his surroundings. Sergeant Michael Grant sat across from him, staring at the floor, unable to shake the haunting images of the day before. "Hey, buddy," Michael finally whispered, his voice raw from sleepless hours. He crouched down and gently placed a hand on Rex's broad neck. "You saved my life yesterday. You saved all of us. But why, Rex? How did you know?" The door creaked open, and Captain Reynolds entered, his face pale and serious. He carried a file thick with papers, sealed with a red stamp marked classified. Without a word, he set it down on the table and pulled out a worn, leather-bound notebook. "Michael," Reynolds began, his voice low, "we've been digging into Emily Rose's case all night. There's something you need to know." Michael stood up, tension radiating through his body. "Go on." Reynolds flipped open the notebook, revealing pages filled with the messy handwriting of a grieving mother. Emily's mother kept this journal. In it, she writes about how Rex wasn't just assigned to protect Emily during her father's deployments. He became something more. Michael frowned. "I knew Rex was stationed with the family for emotional support after her father died in combat." "But," Reynolds nodded, "it's more than that. Emily suffered from a rare heart condition. Her doctors said she didn't have long. She was afraid to sleep at night, afraid her heart would just stop. And every night, Rex would lie beside her, his chest pressed against hers. If her heart rate dropped, he'd nudge her awake. He kept her alive longer than anyone thought possible." Michael sat down heavily, his hands trembling. He remembered the bond between Emily and Rex, how the dog would sit by her side during every hospital visit, never once leaving her alone. Reynolds continued, his voice thick with emotion. "Her mom wrote that in her final days, Emily kept saying she didn't want Rex to be sad when she was gone. She said, 'Promise me Rex will find something to protect after me. He needs to protect someone. That's what makes him happy.'" Michael swallowed hard, his throat tight with grief. "And here's the most chilling part," Reynolds added, sliding a photo across the table. It was a grainy surveillance image from the cemetery, taken before the funeral began. In it, a man dressed as a maintenance worker could be seen placing something on the coffin, right before the bear appeared. "That man is still out there," Reynolds said darkly. "And we believe he's part of a larger network targeting military families. This wasn't an isolated act." Michael looked back at Rex, who now rested his head on his paws but kept his eyes locked on him, as if he understood every word. "You're telling me, maybe this code didn't just sense a bomb. He somehow knew Emily was still in danger, even after she was gone?" Reynolds nodded. "That's exactly what I'm saying. And now, we think he's the only one who can help us track them down." For the first time in hours, something flickered in Rex's eyes. A spark of purpose. Michael stood and took a deep breath. "Then we've got work to do." That day, Rex was officially reassigned. No longer just a retired service dog mourning the loss of a child he loved, he became the centerpiece of a new mission. A mission to uncover the hidden threats still lurking in the shadows, targeting those who had already suffered enough. And as the sun set that evening over the quiet cemetery, a young mother stood before her daughter's grave. She placed fresh flowers by the small headstone and knelt beside the bronze statue of Rex. "Thank you," she whispered, her fingers brushing over the cold metal. "Thank you for keeping your promise." In the distance, a black SUV pulled away from the base. In the back seat, Rex sat tall, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. His journey wasn't over. Not yet. The bond he had with Emily didn't end with her death. It had become a mission, a reason to keep going. And no matter where that road led, one thing was certain. Rex would never stop protecting those who needed him most. The following weeks turned into a whirlwind of activity. Military intelligence teams worked tirelessly, combing through every lead connected to the attempted bombing at Emily Rose's funeral. Surveillance footage, financial records, and intercepted communications revealed chilling details. A sleeper cell embedded within U.S. borders, using high-profile military funerals to carry out devastating attacks. But despite all their resources, the most effective lead they had was Rex. Sergeant Michael Grant found himself back in the field, this time accompanied not by fellow soldiers, but by the loyal K9 who had saved his life. They traveled from base to base, meeting with families and attending memorial services under heightened security. Rex was trained to detect explosives, but after what happened at the funeral, it was clear his senses went beyond any standard military protocol. It wasn't long before they arrived at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. A large military funeral was scheduled for the following day, honoring 3 fallen heroes who had served overseas. Intelligence reports hinted that something was planned for this event, but no one knew exactly what. That night, as the base settled into a tense, uneasy silence, Michael sat with Rex outside their quarters. The old shepherd sat upright, his ears twitching at every distant sound, his eyes locked on the moonlit horizon. "You feel it too, don't you, boy?" Michael whispered, his voice barely audible over the soft rustle of wind through the trees. Rex let out a low growl, his body suddenly tense. He stood up, his nose raised to the air, sniffing with sharp precision. Without warning, he took off toward the eastern perimeter of the base. "Rex, hold up," Michael called, grabbing his tactical vest and sprinting after him. Rex ran with unwavering focus, weaving through those rows of vehicles parked near the base chapel. Michael caught up just as Rex stopped beside a dark military Humvee, his snout pressed against the vehicle's undercarriage. Michael's heart pounded in his chest. He crouched down and pulled out a flashlight, his fingers trembling as he scanned beneath the vehicle. There it was, a small black device, expertly attached to the fuel tank. Another bomb, this time set to detonate the moment the engine started. Michael's training kicked in immediately. He radioed in the bomb squad, his voice calm but urgent. Soldiers arrived within minutes, securing the area and working feverishly to disable the device. Once again, thanks to Rex, a tragedy had been averted before it could unfold. As dawn broke over Fort Bragg, the funeral proceeded under heavy security. The families of the fallen soldiers never knew how close they'd come to losing their own lives that day. And standing off to the side, away from the crowds, was Rex, watchful, resolute, and ready for whatever came next. That evening, as Michael walked Rex back to their quarters, a high-ranking intelligence officer approached. His name was Colonel David Strickland, a man known for handling the most sensitive operations within the military. "Sergeant Grant?" the colonel greeted, his eyes shifting toward Rex. "Or should I say, Agent Grant, your reassignment just came through." Michael raised an eyebrow. "Reassignment, sir?" Strickland handed him a sealed envelope. "You and Rex have been assigned to a new task force, Operation Silent Shield. you'll be working directly under Homeland Security. Your mission is to root out the network behind these attacks. From what I'm seeing, this dog isn't just a canine asset. He's the key to stopping something much bigger. Michael looked down at Rex, who sat calmly at his side, his eyes alert and focused on the colonel, as if he understood every word. "I'm in," Michael said firmly, his hand resting on Rex's head. "Wherever this leads, we'll finish it." Strickland nodded. "Your first assignment starts tomorrow. And Grant? Bring him," he added, gesturing toward Rex. "There are some things only he can find." As they walked away, Michael felt a renewed sense of purpose. He thought back to Emily Rose and the promise she'd made her mother keep, that Rex would always have someone to protect. And now, that promise had grown into something greater. Rex wasn't just a guardian of one child's memory anymore. He was a protector of countless lives, a silent shield standing between innocent people and the darkness that threatened them. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the base, Michael knew this was only the beginning. Whatever dangers lay ahead, he and Rex would face them together, loyal to the mission, loyal to each other, and unwavering in their fight to protect those who could not protect themselves. The following day brought a new sense of urgency. Michael and Rex were flown to a high-security operations center in Quantico, Virginia, a facility known only to those involved in the nation's most critical counterterrorism missions. The facility was buried deep underground, its long, cold corridors lined with reinforced steel and the constant hum of classified technology. As they walked through the facility, Rex remained close to Michael's side, his sharp eyes scanning every movement, every shadow. Despite being surrounded by the most advanced surveillance equipment in the country, it was clear to everyone in that room, Rex was their most valuable asset. Colonel Strickland greeted them in the briefing room, a massive digital map of the United States glowing behind him. Red markers dotted the screen, each representing an unexplained security breach or suspicious activity linked to the sleeper cell responsible for the cemetery attack. "We believe these incidents are connected," Strickland began, his voice firm, "but we're missing one critical piece: where they're operating from. We need to find their command center and fast. Based on intelligence gathered from the attempted attack at Fort Bragg, they're planning something even larger. Something catastrophic." Michael folded his arms, his expression tense. "What's the target?" Strickland exchanged a glance with one of his analysts before answering. "A major Veterans Day event, Washington, D.C. This Sunday. It's expected to draw tens of thousands of people, including top military officials and veterans. If they pull this off..." He didn't need to finish. Michael crouched next to Rex, his hand resting gently on the dog's back. "You ready for this, partner?" he whispered. Rex let out a soft, low bark. Quiet but determined. The plan was set. They would move immediately, deploying undercover teams throughout the capital, but the final lead depended on Rex. His nose had already saved hundreds of lives. Now, it might be the key to stopping a mass tragedy. By nightfall, they were already in position near the National Mall. The cold November wind whipped through the city streets, carrying the faint sound of construction and distant traffic. Michael walked alongside Rex through a network of underground service tunnels, areas rarely accessed by civilians, but perfect for those planning an attack to move undetected. Rex moved with purpose, his nose close to the ground, ears twitching at the slightest noise. They passed through a dimly lit maintenance corridor when Rex suddenly froze. His body tensed, hackles raised, and he let out a sharp growl. Michael's heart kicked into overdrive. He drew his sidearm and scanned the darkness ahead with his tactical flashlight. "Talk to me, boy. What do you smell?" Rex moved slowly toward a sealed maintenance door, his nose pressed against the metal, and he let out a deep, warning bark. Michael signaled the backup team through his comms. Within seconds, Heavily armed units swarmed the corridor, setting up a perimeter. Explosive ordnance experts moved in to scan the area, and what they found made everyone's blood run cold. Behind that door, hidden under false flooring, was a massive stockpile of explosives, enough to level several city blocks. Alongside the explosives, they found military uniforms, forged access passes, and detailed plans of the Veterans Day event, including escape routes and strategic attack points. The bomb squad worked quickly to disable the devices, their hands steady despite the knowledge that one wrong move could end everything. Michael stood back, watching Rex pace in front of the door, his sharp eyes fixed on every move. Once the devices were safely disarmed, Colonel Strickland arrived on the scene. He placed a hand on Michael's shoulder and shook his head in disbelief. "If it weren't for him," Strickland said, glancing at Rex, "we'd be talking about this city in the past tense." Michael crouched beside Rex, rubbing his hand through the dog's thick fur. "You did it again, partner," he whispered. But Rex wasn't celebrating. His eyes scanned the dark tunnel ahead, as if sensing that their mission wasn't over yet. And he was right. One final piece remained, a shadow moving in the distance. The leader of the sleeper cell, the man seen in that surveillance footage at the cemetery, was still out there. Rex let out a low growl and took off down the tunnel without hesitation. Michael sprinted after him, heart pounding as his boots echoed against the concrete walls. And in that moment, under the dark streets of the nation's capital, a final confrontation was about to unfold, one that would determine not only the safety of thousands of innocent lives, but the very legacy of loyalty and sacrifice that Rex had lived for. This time, it wasn't just about finding a bomb. It was about facing the enemy head-on and finishing what they had started. Rex darted through the narrow tunnels with a speed and precision that left even the most seasoned soldiers struggling to keep up. His instincts led him deeper into the maze of service corridors beneath Washington, D.C., a forgotten underworld where danger lurked in every shadow. Michael's pulse thundered in his ears as he chased after his partner, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, his finger resting against the trigger of his weapon. "Rex, hold up," he called out. But the mutt didn't slow down. He had locked onto something that couldn't wait. They reached a long, dimly lit corridor that ended at a rusted metal door. Rex stopped abruptly, his ears pinned back and his nose pressed tight against the base of the door. He let out a low, guttural growl, his way of telling Michael that their target was on the other side. Michael activated his comms. "This is Sergeant Grant. Target is cornered. Eastern Utility Corridor, Sector B. Request immediate backup. Backup en route," came the crackling reply. Michael took a steadying breath and pressed his ear against the door. He could hear faint shuffling, hurried breathing, and then a voice, speaking softly in a language he didn't understand. And then, silence. Michael backed away and signaled Rex. "Stay close, buddy. We finish this together." With one powerful kick, Michael forced the door open. It slammed against the wall with a metallic clang, revealing a wide maintenance chamber. On the far side of the room stood a man, his face partially obscured by a hood, his hands raised, but his eyes told a different story. Cold, calculating, dangerous. Rex immediately positioned himself in front of Michael, his body tense and ready to strike. "Don't move," Michael commanded, his weapon trained on the man. But the suspect smirked, his gaze flicking toward a small device strapped to his wrist. A detonator. Michael's heart dropped. "Don't you do it!" he barked, stepping forward, his aim locked on the suspect's hand. But the man's thumb was already moving toward the trigger. In a flash, Rex lunged forward, teeth bared, launching himself through the air like a missile. He clamped down on the man's arm before the button could be pressed, twisting his powerful jaws until the detonator clattered to the ground. A struggle erupted. The man fought furiously, trying to shake Rex off, but the German Shepherd held firm, growling fiercely as he wrestled the terrorist to the ground. Michael rushed forward, kicking the detonator away and pinning the man down, forcing his hands behind his back. "Target secured," Michael shouted into his radio. "Detonator recovered. Repeat, the detonator has been secured." Within moments, backup poured into the chamber. Armed soldiers took control of the scene, securing the prisoner and removing the remaining explosives found hidden within the chamber walls. Michael knelt beside Rex, his chest heaving with relief. "You did it, boy," he whispered, pulling the dog close. Rex licked his hand, his breathing heavy but his eyes filled with the same unwavering loyalty that had carried him through every mission. Colonel Strickland arrived moments later, his expression a rare mix of shock and admiration. "You and that dog just prevented a national disaster, Sergeant. Do you understand the magnitude of what you've done here tonight?" Michael stood, placing a steady hand on Rex's back. "It wasn't me, sir. It was him. He's the real hero." Strickland nodded, his gaze falling on Rex. "Then it's time the whole world knows his name." News outlets swarmed the area as word of the successful operation spread. Headlines the next morning told the story of a heroic K9 who had saved Washington, D.C. from unimaginable destruction. Images of Rex, standing tall and proud beside his handler, flooded every major news network. A week later, at a ceremony held on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, Rex was awarded the Medal of Bravery, the highest honor ever given to a service animal. Veterans, military families, and civilians gathered to pay tribute to a dog whose courage had saved thousands of lives. As Michael stood on the stage beside his loyal companion, he looked out at the sea of faces, some smiling, some wiping away tears. And he knew that this wasn't just the end of a mission. It was the beginning of a legacy. A legacy that would remind every person who stood there and every person who heard this story that loyalty, courage, and love can come from the most unexpected places, even from a four-legged hero who refused to give up. And as the crowd erupted in applause, Rex sat calmly by Michael's side, his eyes scanning the horizon as if already looking toward the next mission, the next soul to protect. Because for Rex, it was never about the medals or the recognition. It was about fulfilling a promise to a little girl named Emily Rose and to every life that still needed saving. The ceremony had barely ended when a familiar restlessness returned to Rex. Despite the medals and praise, the German Shepherd seemed uneasy, his sharp eyes constantly scanning the faces in the crowd, as if searching for a danger no one else could see. Michael noticed it immediately. Kneeling down, he scratched behind Rex's ear. "You're not done, are you, boy?" he whispered, his voice heavy with understanding. Just as Michael stood, Colonel Strickland approached with an expression far more serious than the moment called for. "Sergeant Grant, we have a situation," he said quietly, keeping his voice low to avoid alarming the nearby crowd. Michael's stomach tightened. "Another threat?" Strickland nodded grimly. "We just received intelligence that the man you captured wasn't the leader of the cell. He was just a high-ranking operative. The real mastermind is still out there, and he's already activated the next phase of their plan." Michael glanced down at Rex, who stood motionless, his gaze locked in the direction of the reflecting pool. Without a word, Rex took off at a sprint. "Rex!" Michael shouted, already running after him. Strickland was close behind. "Let him lead. Wherever he's going, it's where we need to be." The German Shepherd cut through the thinning crowds with incredible precision, his nose low, following a scent trail invisible to the human eye. He charged toward the reflecting pool, then veered sharply toward the underground maintenance access near the base of the Washington Monument. Michael's heart raced as Rex paused at the sealed door, growling low and deep. Michael motioned for Strickland and the nearby tactical unit to close in. "Thermal scanners are picking up movement inside, a soldier confirmed through the comms. Multiple heat signatures. Michael didn't hesitate. With a powerful kick, he broke through the rusted door, weapon drawn. Rex charged in ahead of him, his growl echoing through the dark chamber. Inside, a group of men were gathered around a table, frantically wiring together a series of high-tech devices. One of them looked up, panic flashing across his face as he reached for a small black detonator. "Don't move!" Michael roared, stepping forward, his weapon locked on the man's head. But the leader, a tall figure with sharp features and cold, dark eyes, didn't hesitate. His thumb moved toward the trigger. Before anyone could react, Rex lunged again, this time faster and more ferociously than anyone had ever seen him move. His powerful jaws clamped onto the man's wrist, knocking the detonator to the ground as the others scrambled to escape. The chamber erupted into chaos. Soldiers poured in through the entrance, securing the room and subduing the remaining operatives. Explosives technicians rushed to disarm the devices, sweat pouring from their faces as they worked against a rapidly counting timer. Seconds felt like hours. But just as the timer reached its final moment, the last wire was cut. The room fell silent. Michael dropped to his knees beside Rex, pulling him close. The dog was panting hard, his chest heaving with exertion, but his eyes remained clear, focused. "You did it again, partner," Michael whispered. "You saved them all." Colonel Strickland stepped forward, shaking his head in disbelief. "That bomb would have taken out the entire National Mall," he said quietly. "Thousands of lives, gone in an instant. If it weren't for this dog—" His words trailed off, unnecessary. Everyone in that room knew exactly who the hero was. That night, long after the sun had set and the city had quieted, Michael and Rex stood alone at Emily Rose's grave. The bronze statue of Rex beside her headstone gleamed softly in the moonlight. Michael crouched down, his hand resting gently on the cool metal. "We kept the promise, Emily," he said softly. His voice cracked with emotion. Rex found something to protect. He found a purpose. And he's still out there, keeping the world safe, just like you wanted. Beside him, Rex sat tall and proud, his eyes scanning the horizon. Though his body bore the scars of countless battles and his fur had begun to gray, his spirit remained unbreakable. And as the night wind swept across the cemetery, carrying the faint sound of the city beyond, Michael knew one thing for certain. Rex would never stop. No matter how many missions they completed, no matter how many lives they saved, Rex's purpose wasn't fulfilled by medals or ceremonies. His mission was eternal. To protect, to serve, to love, without question, without hesitation, without end. And as long as there was a life left to save, Rex would be there. Always. The following weeks passed in relative peace, but Rex never let his guard down. Even during quiet walks with Michael through the base, his ears stayed alert, his eyes constantly scanning. One afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, Michael sat quietly beside Rex near the reflecting pool. "You've done enough, buddy," he whispered. "Maybe it's time for some rest." Rex looked up at him, those loyal eyes full of understanding, but also something else, purpose. Michael chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Yeah, I didn't think you were the retiring type." From that day on, wherever Michael went, Rex was right there. And though he'd earned his rest, the world always seemed a little safer, knowing that somewhere out there, a hero still stood watch.